it's time for me to vacate the podium area here and make way for Elder Bruce Dotson, who's going to bring us his morning message based on Vayigash. That is our weekly Torah portion, and I'll just scoot out of the way here and
thanks, Alan.
Let you take over.
You don't have to scoot too much.
Love you, buddy.
All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I don't think it's irrational, but it's been an irrationally good week for me. But it's not irrational. It's when you feel encouraged by God, and I know we have our ups and downs and all that, but I just say, Baruch Hashem, thank you. It's just been a really sweet week, and hopefully I can impart some of that energy to you guys. Joseph certainly is an inspiring story for us to, when we're thinking about how rough things are. And sometimes, you know what, they actually are rough. It's not just your imagination. It's not just you being whiny. It's tough, but there's good stuff ahead. But yeah, this week's Parsha is Vayigash. It means, and he came near, or he approached. And I'll just sort of run through it. Joseph, he's put his brothers through a whole series of tests leading up to this week's Parsha. They do not know who he is. It would take a lot of discipline to be that quiet for me. I don't know if I possess that. But he wants to see, have they changed? Who are they? So remember last week, the brothers, they thought they were in the clear. They got, they were returning to Jacob with food, and the youngest son, Benjamin, and of course Joseph planted his own silver goblet on Benjamin, which got the brothers hauled back before the Egyptian governor, a.k.a. Joseph. So we read about it this morning. Judah helped facilitate Joseph being sold into slavery. But now we find that Judah begs Joseph not to take Benjamin as a slave, but to keep himself as a slave instead. Remember just a few chapters back, they couldn't even talk to Joseph in a civil way, right? If you've had siblings, or just been around people, sometimes things can really sour in a serious way. They were very, very sour, and it wasn't that long ago, as we read. But remember, they threw him in the cistern, and then they carried a little form. It's like, hey, let's have lunch and figure out what to do with him next. And by the way, does anyone know what they had for lunch? I do this joke every year. An MLT. What else would they have? A mutton, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, of course. Sorry. There's more than one reason it's the most wonderful time of the year. I have to wait a whole year to pull that bad joke on you guys. But hey, I'm a dad. I qualify. But yeah, they could have had an MLT. It doesn't say that they didn't. But anyway, but yeah, Judah, the same brother who suggested selling Joseph into slavery, is now asking to be made a slave himself in order to save Benjamin and to save his father, right? It was love for his brother, but especially love for his father. So the brothers have changed a lot over the years. Yes, a lot of time had passed, but the biggest change in reality was their heart change. And that's what Joseph wanted to find out. So at that point, Joseph can't hold it back anymore, though. He clears the Egyptians out of the room. He's crying. He's wailing. And in Genesis 45:3, he says, I am Joseph. And the first thing he wants to know is, my father still alive? And his brothers were unable to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. The CJB says they were dumbfounded. They were without words. And it really shocked. And the brothers didn't know if they were in the clear. They didn't know Joseph declaring, hey, I'm Joseph, if that was going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I think they probably thought it was going to be bad for them. But Joseph is not going to take revenge on them, and he's not going to take advantage of his power that he has over them. Instead, he reassures them. Genesis 45:5. So now, don't be grieved and don't be angry in your own eyes that you sold me here, since it was for preserving life that God sent me here before you. Wow. That's just amazing. Again, you can't decouple God's Spirit from this whole experience, but in the natural, that's just an amazing reaction when truly he had it in his power to at least, scare him a little bit more, right? He didn't even let it ride. He didn't let him sweat. He let him know that they were going to be okay. Let's see here. So, Joseph sends his brothers back to Jacob in style with lots of food and gifts and wagons to bring Jacob and the whole family back to Egypt, where they'll have food to eat. Jacob, though, can't really believe it. For a long time, he's believed that Joseph is dead, and not only that, to believe that, okay, you're second in command in Egypt, that it was just, he was also dumbfounded, I guess. So he had some serious doubts about it, and coming back to Egypt was not just a casual thing to do, right? It wasn't like, hey, we're going on vacation. Remember, he was in the land that was promised to him. Going to Egypt was not the land that was promised to him. But God, well, let me back up. But remember, if you go back to Abraham's time, which would have been his grandfather, the father had already told Abraham that this was going to happen. Genesis 15:13, then he said to Abram, "Know for certain that your seed will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. This goes all the way back to Abraham. Abraham, Isaac, we're now on Jacob, right? So we read it this morning. Along the way, Jacob stops at Beersheba, and he offers sacrifices to God. And the father reassures Jacob in a vision at night about going down to Egypt, which we read that in Genesis 46:2-4. I am the God of your father. He said, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will turn you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will almost certainly, not almost, sorry, hey, one little bit makes a big difference. Also, most certainly bring you up. Joseph will put his hands on your eyes. That makes sense, right? I think we know what that means, but if you just read it, I had to look, and I was like, I think I know what it means to put his hands on his eyes. If you look at a complete Jewish Bible, it's worded a little bit differently. Verse 4, not only will I go down with you to Egypt, but I will also bring you back here again after Joseph has closed your eyes. And we know that's how it happens, right? When Jacob dies, later he is returned to the promised land. So, but fast forward to the great story, Jacob and his whole family, they're reunited again in Egypt. They're settled in Goshen. Conveniently, the Egyptians aren't too keen on guys that work with animals, with shepherds. So God keeps them in a safe place because I know things unravel in Egypt, but God did keep them safe. He kept them separate from Egyptian culture. They would have been very quickly absorbed into Egyptian culture. It was just human nature. You become like who you hang out with. So even though they were in Egypt, God had separated them out. And it was a blessing as well. It was a good land, and they prospered in every way. So that's the quick overview of Vayigash. It's a classic story. I get to do my MLT joke. And but there's also, and this is... The internet's a blessing and sometimes not, but there's lots of information, but there's lots of parallels between Joseph and Yeshua. And God does work in patterns. He does teach us through those patterns. And so I'm just going to point out and maybe add a few scriptures along with it, some of the parallels. There's many, many more, so I'm not trying to say, oh, this is an exhaustive list or that it's perfectly aligned, but it's some neat stuff to think about. So, a lot of us know this, that one of the titles for Yeshua is Mashiach ben Yosef, or Messiah, son of Joseph. And that is because there are so many character traits and the suffering that we see laid out and how Joseph reacted as well. Yeshua came as a suffering servant like Joseph. But yeah, there's a lot of foreshadowing for Yeshua. Little things like miraculous birth. Jacob, just to remind you, Jacob was 90 years old, and Rachel was barren for a long time. So that is, in fact, a miraculous birth. Now, of course, Yeshua, even more miraculous, Mary was a virgin. Genesis 30:22 and 24. Then God took note of Rachel, heeded her prayer, and made her fertile. She conceived and had a son, and said, God has taken away my disgrace. She called him Joseph, may he be added, saying, may Adonai add to me another son. And then Matthew 1:18, of course we know, here is how the birth of Yeshua, the Messiah, took place. When his mother Miriam was engaged to Joseph, before they were married, she was found to be pregnant from the Ruach HaKodesh. Another parallel, both were hated by their brothers. Genesis 37:8, his brothers retorted, yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job bossing us around. You know, I'm the youngest in my family, so I probably could have said something like that to my brothers. Probably did, in fact. But anyway, they hated him still more for his dreams and for what he said. Referring to Yeshua, John 15:25, but this has happened in order to fulfill the words in their Torah which read, they hated me for no reason at all. Also, now, Yeshua's actual brothers, siblings, I don't think they hated him, but his whole family did think he was a little crazy, and I was reading that, and I thought, you know, we get to experience that on a regular, I think, as Messianic believers, that our families might think they're a little crazy, they're a little off. And, of course, they came around to Yeshua, and we have James as the head of the church and the Jerusalem Council, but maybe initially he was skeptical. Where is that verse? Mark 3:21, talking about Yeshua's family. When his family heard about this, they set out to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind. So no one loves you quite like family. Let's see here. I'm going to skip over several, Lois, just because it got too long, because there just are so many parallels. Can you take me to about Exodus 21:32 on the slides, thereabouts? So another interesting thing, remember Judah, who begs to be made a slave in Benjamin's place, he offered to sell Joseph for how much silver? Anyone? Well, 20. Double check me. Now, Yeshua was sold for 30. Well, it is and it isn't. It's just me fumbling around up here. That's why I need y'all's help. No. So let me lay the groundwork. Of course, we know that Judah in Greek is Judas. We didn't tell our son Judah that for a long time because we didn't want to give him a complex, you know. But yeah, Judah tried to sell, or he sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver, and Judas sold Yeshua for 30 pieces of silver. And the interesting thing is 30 pieces of silver is what the value of a slave was considered, and we read it in the Torah. If the ox gores a male or female slave, he is to pay 30 shekels of silver to their master, and the ox is to be stoned. You got me second guessing myself. Anyone double check that 20 pieces of silver on Joseph? I know I'm right. I've got to be right. Yeah, but there is a discrepancy in the numbers, and some people try to explain that through inflation, basically. And remember that Joseph was sold a long time before the Torah was given. The Torah of Moses was given. So let's see here. 20 is correct. I never should have doubted myself, but I'm good at that. Okay, so moving on, Genesis 37:28. When some men, Midianite merchants, passed by, they dragged Joseph up. Oh, it's right there in front of me. Up and out of the pit, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. and they brought Joseph to Egypt. So yeah, but why is it 20 then and 30 there? No one knows. Could be inflation, though. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years between this time and when the Torah is given. Matthew 26:15, and Judas said, "What are you willing to give me if I turn Yeshua over to you?" They counted out 30 silver coins and gave them to Yehuda. As I was reading about that, I always thought, hey, 30 of anything is a lot, right? But it really is considered a small price, right? The price for Yeshua's life, 30 pieces is the price of a slave. Because remember, slavery was much more common. It wasn't, it was just very common. So, it was even almost insult to injury that it was only 30 pieces of silver for someone so important. But yeah, that was neat that they both were sold for the price of a slave. Let's see. Okay, another interesting thing. Just about everybody you read about in the Bible, right? They've got some dirty laundry. You know, you're like, oh man, he's a good guy, but boy, he really messed up over here. But Joseph, there's no recorded sin from Joseph. Now you could say, well, maybe he shouldn't have laid out that dream the way he did, all that, but nowhere is it mentioned that he sinned. Now, am I elevating him to Yeshua's level? No, but still, it's notable, it's noteworthy that there's no scandal with Joseph, right? Almost everyone else has a scandal in the Bible. Let's see, 2 Corinthians 5:21. God made the sinless man, referring to Yeshua. God made the sinless man be a sin offering on our behalf so that in union with him we might fully share in God's righteousness. Again, referring to Yeshua's sinlessness. Another parallel, both were given all power and authority save but one, right? For Joseph, the Pharaoh was the only one with more power. In Yeshua's case, the Father is the only one that was above him. Genesis 41:44, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I, Pharaoh, decree that without your approval, no one is to raise his hand or his foot in all the land of Egypt. I know it's symbolic, it's not literal, but that's a lot of authority. Matthew 28:18, Yeshua came and talked with them. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Another parallel, both Joseph and Yeshua began their ministries, if you could say, when they were about 30. Genesis 41:46, Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And then Luke 3:23, Yeshua was about 30 years old when he began his public ministry. Joseph and Yeshua suffered according to a predetermined plan of God. Both were used to turn intentional harm into good. Genesis 45:5-7. This is, again, Joseph talking to his brothers, right? But don't be sad about that you sold me into slavery here, or angry at yourselves, because it was God who sent me ahead of you to preserve life. The famine has been over the land for the last 2 years, and for yet another 5 years there will be neither plowing nor harvest. Verse 7, God sent me ahead of you to ensure that you have descendants on earth and to save your lives in a great deliverance. And of course, Joseph didn't just save the lives of the 70 that he was part of his family, but many, many thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps millions of people for the whole land, right? All of Egypt and people coming from all the other lands around that were also suffering from the drought. So, and that was, again, part of God's plan. Remember, he had already told Abraham, go back 2 generations, that, hey, this is what's going to happen. So, Acts 2:23, talking about Yeshua, this man was arrested in accordance with God's predetermined plan and foreknowledge. And through the agency of persons not bound by the Torah, you nailed him up on the stake and killed him. With God's predetermined plan and foreknowledge. Acts 3:18, But this is how God fulfilled what he had announced in advance when he spoke through all the prophets, namely, that his Messiah was to die. And then finally, Ephesians 3:11, this accords with God's age-old purpose accomplished in the Messiah, Yeshua, our Lord. So I think, we can, Yeshua is our master, and we, of course, want to imitate him and do what he did and be who he is in the sense of his goodness and his righteousness. But Joseph, I think maybe we can relate just a little bit more because Joseph was not God, but he exhibited a lot of Yeshua's characteristics and had some similar experiences. So, but I think we would have a hard time reacting like Joseph did. I think we should try, right? That we should be merciful. And it's easy when it's easy, right? But truly, Joseph had been wronged, he'd been insulted, he'd been harmed, he'd been hurt physically, emotionally, spiritually, and basically just about every way you could think of, and yet he was still merciful to his brothers. And so that's a very high standard that we should strive for ourselves, each of us individually and as a community. But life is hard, and it's a struggle, and we read about it in the Bible. Again, just about everybody you read about has had some troubles. Judah, we're reading, say, oh, he sold him. He was ready to sell himself as a slave. Well, he just had a lot of problems along the way. You can go back, and but God brought it around, right? God made a way for Judah to do the right thing, and I think he does the same for us. But yeah, we could insert our name here on any number of stories we read about in the Bible. Also, I think we tend to think, well, life isn't going well, so, and this is possible, but you might say, well, I'm being punished for a sin, I've been disobedient, and again, that's possible. But it's also possible that, it's okay, just life is hard. Life is messy. We live in a fallen, broken world with lots of fallen, broken people. Nobody treats you as good or bad as family. Maybe you're mishpachah, there's problems there even, right? We hope not, but it just happens. And I think it's good just to remember that doesn't mean you're in the wrong place. It doesn't mean you're outside of what God has you to do, just because things aren't going great at the moment. Like, keep looking forward to the good things that are coming. Remember that God does have plans. Now, we got into a predestination debate briefly this morning. I'm not saying predestination, but God's just not surprised. He knows what's going to happen. He's making a way for you. He's not willing that any should perish. He's going to help you get there. He is helping us get there. So we can't sort of freak out when things aren't going well. Or even 50 now, you look at your life and you say, well, it's not so impressive. It's the same today, the bad kind of same today, yesterday, and forever. Like, work is work. You just show up, you do your things. The joints get, well, but also hold on, right? This is not as good as it gets. God has a plan. He has goodness, too, for us right now. That's the other thing, and that's where your attitude does make a big difference. If you want to be miserable, you can find a reason to be miserable. But it's okay to acknowledge, like, the hardness of things, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like, well, yeah, it's not easy. And Joseph probably didn't, it doesn't say that he understood what God was doing to him, right? When he was in the cistern, when he was in jail, he didn't know the outcome. God, it doesn't say that God said, hey, don't worry, this is exactly what I'm going to do for you. Don't worry about it. No, he was faithful without knowing for sure what God was up to. So, just because things are going poorly doesn't mean you're in the wrong place or the wrong time. God's taken really great care of us, and there's so much better to come. And even if you mess it up a little or a lot, God still has a plan for that. Remember, he's not surprised. So don't give up. And you never know when good news is right around the corner as well. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this week's Parsha, and I appreciate you guys listening, and Shabbat Shalom.